Kevin, there it was, calendar item, beginning of August, as Republicans start to extract themselves from President Trump. A little itty-bitty article in the Washington Post about the strategy of Republicans after Trump. With this stimulus, how alone do the Senate Republicans feel?
Well, I'm struck by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell really, allowing for there to be just a little bit of space and wiggle room between Senate Republicans and President Trump. And quite honestly, I think it's because he's looking at the map in the down ballot races for on November 3rd and looking to see how he could be able to hold together a Republican coalition. But it's quite striking when you hear Secretary Mnuchin on the Sunday shows over the weekend still not able to get to some type of short-term deal with Speaker Pelosi.
What's your timeline? What's the Cirilli x-axis of when this game of chicken ends for the Senate Republicans? Is it Tuesday at 11 a.m. or is it the silliness I hear about September?
Well, I think what you just said, the way you described it as a political game of chicken, is completely accurate. And a couple of weeks ago, I said that they might likely have to go into the first week of August, and that the intensity surrounding these negotiations would likely continue. So I think what everyone's looking for right now is for there to be some type of breakthrough with Speaker Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin in the first half of this week to get to some type of movement beyond. However, I think back to the government shutdowns of predating the Trump administration back in the Obama years, and this could really drag on should there not be that sense of urgency.
Kevin, it's the ugly part of negotiations where it's a battle of optics and not a battle of substance. And on the optics, quite clearly the Republicans don't look good at the moment. They came to this late. They came with a bill late. They started talks late. And they're saying to the Democrats, OK, short-term extension. The Democrats are saying, we've been waiting here for months for you to come to us and talk. We want a long-term deal. At some point, though, the optics turn and the Democrats start to look bad for dragging their feet as well. How sustainable is Speaker Pelosi's position to say, no short-term deal, we want something long-term?
I don't think it's that sustainable, to be completely frank with you, because I talk with centrist Democrats who are scratching their heads and saying, we got to get to some type of approach here. They're not, as you just pointed out, they're not fighting. They are fighting over a host of different money allocations and whatnot. But right now, over the weekend, in the past 72 hours, the fight's been over process, piecemeal or a total package. And that right there, I think, is going to lead to some palpable frustration, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of Republicans and Democrats negotiating in leadership and in the administration. But there are a lot of rank and file members who don't even have any type of plan to sell to their constituents right now. And once those constituents are on the hook, whether it's the unemployment benefits or whether it's small and medium-sized business employees who are scratching their heads about a lack of certainty coming from Washington, D.C. and a lack of liquidity for their employers, that's when things are going to get really intense.
Kevin, as John was saying, the stimulus debate really is the main story in Washington, D.C. But then we have the side story of TikTok and President Trump potentially banning the company from U.S. operations. How much is this a real story? How much should we pay attention to this versus a distraction away from that main issue?
I think in terms of a TikTok being a viable type of social media platform that impacts the economy and day-to-day use, not much. It's a bunch of youths, doing the Macarena. However, I think the precedent that it sets, Lisa, is that the administration, the U.S. administration, is willing to get into to big tech fights. And I think that, as you look at this, and as I talk to Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill about a working coalition of nonpartisanship in terms of U.S.-China relations, this is just now one tool in the policy arsenal that America can utilize in order to impact, in this case, ByteDance, but in further cases, Chinese-backed businesses to really impact their access to the U.S. market, not just in terms of the supply chains and parts. We've seen that on medical, in the medical space, but also in the technological space as well. So, I think the precedent is enormously significant as you look at the intensity of U.S. and China relations.
Everyone aggressively searching for the Kevin Cirilli TikTok account now.
I don't have one.
Kevin dancing
have one.
Macarena. Kevin, I think it's unprecedented to see this in a press release from a giant in the world of tech, from Microsoft. Microsoft appreciates the US government's and President Trump's personal involvement as it continues to develop strong security protections for the country. This is exactly the direction of travel big tech wants Washington, D.C. to go in, to see them as part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Yes, and in fact, when I talk to sources at the State Department, when I talk to Democrats on the Intelligence Committee, they're looking at this and they're saying, you know, look at the 5G network that the U.S. has tried to really bulldoze through with Europe and trying to get Europe and Western allies back on board with the United States in terms of forming a coalition. So I think at face value, yes, it's an app that, you know, we can all make jokes about. But the strategy, Jonathan, I think that's what Lisa and you are tapping into. And Tom, I think the strategy behind it is really where the long-term significance lies.